Welcome everyone to the August 2021 FMDiSC meeting. I'm Bob Shockey. I'll be your host today, and we have a great lineup. First of all, we have Bev Voth, and she's going to be speaking on the subject of parsing JSON and paths to reading JSON. Following up after that will be Jeremy Brown with dynamic dashboards with JavaScript. So hope you enjoy it. And Bev, take it away.
All right. Okay, so this is the FileMaker database, and so I have my slides in here. My name is Beverly Voth. That's a long O. Thanks, Bob, for getting it right. I have been with FileMaker for about 100 years, and I know y'all are going to laugh, but you're going to say, "Oh yeah, I get it," or at least before Claris picked up the product. So long time. And DigFM, I know you all have heard of that. I was a one-time web person for their group, and so I'm considered a founding member of the DigFM group. In my life, I've been a hosting provider, full service hosting, a web developer, a SQL database administrator, but right now, mostly I'm retired and sort of loving it. I do live in a forest, and it's near a famous waterfall, and it has a moonbow, so I'll let y'all look that up. I do a lot of writing. I wrote a book, lots of articles, but currently I'm the membership lead for the Women Innovating Together, or WITFM. And then I listed a couple of the things that I've done. I'm a speaker at the DevCons, and the second year, they said, you know, you're going to do 3 of them and they're all going to be different. And I think one of them even got presented twice. And if you look at that second line, it's CDML versus XML. And again, I know some of you are laughing. Oh yeah, I remember that. I got a couple of those Crystal Awards, which is kind of amazing. Okay, so my path to enlightenment. Basically, why did I create this? I know y'all want to know, everybody wants to know, why did you do this? Well, reading the JSON is a little difficult. And I said, well, what are the schema for that? And so I looked that up, and there's a nice little article on that, and it's sort of confusing at some point to even try to read that. Can you see my web screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Once you read through it 10 times, you kind of get it. And down at the bottom, it even has a link to FileMaker, which takes you to an old site. So somebody needs to update that. And then I said, well, what about FileMaker? How is FileMaker actually handling it with the JSON functions? And mostly I wanted to test that JSON get element, but I ran into that key or index or path. And I said, well, what does that mean? I can test it. So that's basically what it is. I created a little test of what I wanted to test. And I said, well, I know path. They use XPath and XML, and there are other things you use a path. So I said I was okay, but I wanted to test it anyway. But mostly the why is because I want to know how that actually works. How does that function work? How do the other functions work? So I created the little sample database, which only had 3 fields, which was the path that's going to get supplied in this function, and the JSON is another text field, and a scripted result. So let's see a couple of those. So I had JSON, and I said, okay, let me test. I want to say test 1, and I script it, and I let it format for me, and it tells me 1. That's great. What if I do just 1? Well, that wasn't valid. So I said, okay, I'm not right. Let's try a little something else. Here's another one where I had an array. So I figured out test, would probably be the first one, correct? And then I have a 1. So let's try 1 as the next part of that path. I'm putting a dot in there for each of the different elements. And no, that fails because I have an array. So I have to actually put the array in there. And arrays use a 0 index. So if I say test with a 0 index, it shows me everything that's inside of that array. That's great. So now when I want that first value, it has to be like this. And I did that for a while and I said, you know what? No. This is just too hard, me typing that path each time. So I created a little demo file. I'm actually using the get element, the list keys, the list values, and the format elements to help you see what the path is. And eventually I'm going to try to do set element and delete element. I've provided a few resources for you, especially that notation stuff when we get to that. Okay. And I put a little trap in there. If you are using a version that's greater than or equal to 19.3.1, you have a choice of bracket or dot. And I put a little toggle in there so I could toggle it. But mostly I'm going to work with the dot notation. And so I've got a bunch of JSON that I put in my field, just like I did before. And I put a little title in there so I know what I'm kind of looking at, and mostly for the demo so I could group things. Anything that I've already worked on, I put a little check mark, again, added my resources. So this is just that same table portal kind of thing. This would be all the related paths that we're going to go over. So I started with, I'm going to give you one that I already did. And it's just a simple element with 1, 2, and 3. I've already started that. So I'm going to go to it. I give you the JSON again. I show you the calc with nothing in the path. Start off with the path empty. Gives me back my JSON, but it formats it with no white space. So it doesn't care whether you format it or not. I use the function JSON list keys. It gives me my keys. I use the function JSON list values. It gives me my values. And I have a little script that actually pushes those into related paths that I can test. These are the ones I've actually tested. So I've got 1. And when I get down to the point where get element is really just an element and then there are no keys and no values, that's really what I'm looking for. So my path in this JSON to get to that 1 is just a 1. Same thing with 2. I've got some little arrows to navigate. Well, I haven't done 3 yet. And I want you to notice the order. And you see that in the calc too. It rearranged, even though my original JSON had 1, 2, 3, the object is an unordered list. And so when you start doing the calculations on it, it rearranges to basically alphabetical. So let's set 3, and it gave me a value. So I'm good, I'm done. Anytime you're navigating and you want to jump to something specific, it's already done, it's there. So it's pretty simple. There's another one I started, and I have an array of objects. An array does not reorder for you. It takes its list of values and keeps them in that order. And because I have object values in my array, it'll keep them in that order. And here again, it shows that it kept them in that order. I have a little toggle here on here that shows you the actual path to get there. So in this array, index 0, object 1 has a value of 1. So let's get started. And this little thing tells me I started out with an array. It's just a little clue of what I'm doing. Okay, dot notation. Let's do one from the beginning. It's just simple contact, and here's the values: name, address, city, state, postal code, comment, and some things have value and some don't. So when I get started, it just shows you, are you sure you want to format this? Do you want to get started? Get started. It said there was a contact key. So it put it in the list for me. So I can push it, goes over there. These little symbols tell me each one of these are objects or arrays. These are objects. And it automatically put everything that was in this line into keys. And I want you to notice that your keys, again, are reordered, but the elements are listed there in the same number of return delimited list as list values, even though in my original, I didn't have any values. Keep that in mind because it's going to show up later. So I bring it over if I want. I bring over the state if I want. And I don't have to really bring everything over. It's just, again, so I know what the path to something is. So the full path to comment is contact dot underscore comment, the name of the actual object name or the key. Okay. And so I said, all right, let's try a bunch of odd things, because this is where why I also did this, is that there were a lot of different things out there that would do parsing for me, but it would kind of break because I'd have valid JSON, but it really wasn't meant for all of it. So what about emojis? And just a test again that I did already with an array of objects, and just put that in there as part of the object name. Fine. Then I put it in as an object name, but because this is going to be a rearranged, it actually sorted it to be in the last position. Let's show you that index. And there it sorted it. Okay. There's something in the chat. Somebody has a question. I don't know. Can I see it? Oh, yeah. Emojis for Vince. Yep. Emojis for Vince. You got it. Okay, now I can't get rid of that. There we go. Get rid of the chat. All right. Then this is, I put it in as a value, and that's fine. And then I also wanted to show you that your JSON can have Unicode as emojis. And if you actually format it, it changes it back into the code. It's the same as the other ones, although I say the original had that Unicode. Then errors. I was getting some errors, some not. So I said, okay, let's test a few things that I know is an error. I know I wrote it badly. Let's just test it. Begin. Oh, there's an error in your JSON. You know, look at the counts to view the error, or try me at your own risk. Well, I said, well, try me. And it brings across some really funny stuff. But the JSON get element shows the error. JSON list key shows the error, and name shows the error. But there's a trick that if you actually format it before you run the counts, it gives you the nice little dialogue saying, oh, well, you know, there's something really, really wrong. But I trapped for that. So here's another error test. And before I run it, I'm going to actually say format elements. It says there's a duplicate key testing, because I'm in an object that has a list of objects and it's duplicates. It won't take it. See, okay. And then I said, well, how can I fix that to make that actually work? And I changed that object into an array of objects And actually, if I format it, it says it's fine, and it can go on and find the path and stuff. Then I got the dots and key name, and I tried a couple of plugins, and I tried a couple of custom functions, and some worked sometimes, and some didn't work sometimes. And this is basically what happens with when you do it in the earlier versions, or if you just use the dot notation. Begin, it seems like it's correct. You know, here's what the element was. It listed a key just fine. It listed the value of that key just fine, and all of that good stuff. And then when I hit that, it doesn't give me anything. My calc is absolutely empty because it cannot work with this kind of object because it has a dot in the name. So I said, okay, let's get rid of that. Let's switch to bracket notation and try again. And there's your bracket notation. It has the square bracket, a single quote. The object name is exactly the same. Let's go up, show it. See, the object name is exactly the same. And then it ends with a single quote and the square bracket. So that's the difference in it, and it brings that value across for me. It absolutely shows me what the value is. It's very cool. So again, some of the custom functions worked and some didn't. So here's one I just did. It appears the objects are correct, and my little clue that I did it in bracket notation is up here. And this is the actual path that I used to get those values. So, oh, cool, God. Then I did another one which had mixed dot and mixed bracket in there, just to show you that you don't have to use the bracket notation all the time. Start with my calc got exactly what I had. I have one key that had several other items in it. And then I got to a point where it was an array and it had listed the keys as that index 0, 1, 2. And then when it created it, that's exactly what it did. And here's my little clue that this is a key and not an object, that this is an index and not an object key name. So I'm kind of testing as I go. Array has a dot test object and key, and I actually switched from dot to bracket to actually bring that over.
Okay, let's get a treat. I'll give you a treat.
Sort that correctly. But when I got to the value, or when I got to the object name not dotted, I didn't have to actually do that as bracket notation. So I switched back to dot notation. I did the same thing with the second part of that array when I got to the point where it was dots. And I'm manually doing this stuff. I want you to understand that as you're getting and you've actually listed that key, if you find a dot in there, you can kind of do the same thing I did and say, well, change it up and make it a bracket notation. So my bracket test, I made it with the brackets and it got the right value. And in my JSON, I had a final object in that array and it was just a value. No object keys, no index other than it's the third item in this actual array. So you can mix it. I said, very cool. Then I got to the returns because I was doing that, listing the keys and I was listing the values. And I noticed that there were carriage returns. So that's a what happens if kind of thing. And so I just have text with a invisible carriage return in it. And it seems to test out great. I get one key and I get, oh, whoops, there's two lines. Well, yes, the list values does list two values. So I know I cannot use the get value function to actually read them. And then, so what I did in my script was that, you know, I compared that difference of how many lines are here, how many lines are here, and I said, see the calc. But when I actually get to that value and look at that, and when it calcs, it brings you that return back. It's a line, a carriage return, and a line. It's just fine. It doesn't have a problem with it, but you just need to be mindful of that list. So the next one was testing for returns. This is the same thing as this if I had formatted it. And in fact, that did it for me in my calc. It actually changed my carriage return that was in the list to a \r for a return. So that's pretty cool. And so that's what that is. I'm not going to run that one. This one has already has a \r. So I know I'm going to get some really funny lines in my calcs. Okay, again, I don't have the same number of lines or carriage return lists as I do with list values. And so again, I sort of, you know, well, take your chances there. But when I actually get the value of that, it keeps that return that was in there. So it's like, oh, good. Okay, arrays. I didn't talk much about arrays that weren't complex. These are fairly simple arrays, and it starts with a square bracket, and it's just an ordered list. It keeps the items in that order as you read them. And so in my path, testing has an object. And the first object in there is comments, and comments is an array. So I have to get the index of that comment to get the first value, index of the next one to get the next value, and index of the third one, which is index 2 again, because it's 0, 1, 2. Starts with 0 every time. Same way with numbers. When I tested numbers, that was the value when I just get the element. But I had to, you know, use that index to get each one of those values. And I didn't test all the rest of them, which is okay. And I wanted to be really sure that I captured that fact that I am using a snippet which starts with array again and trying to keep things in order. It's in order for the first test and the second test, but within that first index, it's an object. So it reorders them 1, 3, 2 in the path. The same way with 4, 5, 6. And I wanted to show you that you can mix as I'm doing it along. I actually got to this point and I said, I changed that to bracket notation and let that path come across. So if you can see the difference up here a little better, it's totally bracket. The array index, the first element is test in that index, and the child element is 5. Another chat. What's that? Oh, Vince. All right. I tested this in version 17. I actually opened this file in version 17 to test, and I cannot use the bracket notation for that. It's not even going to show up. I'm not going to allow it. So as you're doing your testing, you see. But one thing I noticed is that I cannot just start with a blank path to give me everything. So that first calc actually has to have a dot return if it's an array, and there are a couple other really funny ways. But so if your path doesn't work with just a blank to begin with, try a dot as the first test to get the path. So it has 2 It has two indexes, 0 and 1. In the calcs, again, they're the same. And because I am using inside, this is an unordered list. It's going to reorder them again. Didn't sort right. It reordered them again for me so that my path is for the second index, and it ended up actually being in a different order than when I really had them in my JSON. Like 1, 2, 3, but what I got back was 1, 3, 2. So kind of keep that in mind. And you might have objects and arrays and objects and arrays and objects pretty well nested. So I wanted to show you that your path can end up being, you know, a mixture of the name of the key and the index of what you need to of that array. Okay, here's one I'm going to walk through. This has just a simple family. I want to get the element name. I want to get the element name, and I want to get this element name, and I want to get this element name. This is just an object. So name, age, color, city, wife, and kids are all going to be the first level of the path as I get to it. And it's going to reorder it because it's just an object. Let's try that. Start out, gets me all the path. And it did, it reordered everything. There's my calcs. It's the same number of lines, it just doesn't show it. But I want to get the name. So I bring it across Bob, great, got it, got a value. My final JSON get element gives me that value. Go back up, I want to get the wife. And to get her name, that path changes. I have to go wife.name to get to her. And again, it brings in her value. Back up the path to kids. And it reordered them for me. It's no longer in the order that we wanted, but this happens to be an array with 2 keys. So to get the kids, I have to actually kid name, second kid name to get those values. And again, it reordered them. So don't be alarmed. That's just totally FileMaker. I'm not using any custom functions. I'm not using browser. I'm not a web direct or I'm not using web viewer. I'm not using, you know, I'm not taking it anywhere outside and coming back in. This is totally FileMaker. Okay, so I did the same thing with the bracket notation just to kind of compare what that looks like in your path. So kids is totally bracketed, the index is the same, and the element name is bracketed. Same values. Okay, so when you do the execute FileMaker data API or just the data API, you get back some format that is pretty repetitive in spots. So I wanted to make note that messages is an array when you get it back, although it really only has one object in there. Response is that you got an answer back. Data is like, this is saying your database has returned something. And your database has returned field data, which is the rows when you get it back. So when you do a query, you may get more than one field data. So it needs to be in that array in order to allow you to use that same key again and again. Within the field data are all of the actual field names. And it automatically changed the quotes, returns, and tabs, and a couple other things. It'll do it for you. When you make that request, get it back to JSON, it fixes it. This one doesn't happen to have portal data, but if there was, it would give it to me, and it returns, just an empty tag. So keep that in mind. This happens to be also part of that record. I did another one that had portal data. And it gets even more complex with, nested inside a nested inside a nested. So kind of keep that in mind, that it gets really complex. But once you get a pattern for one row, then you can use the same pattern for the next row. And so your script can loop through those elements and just do chunks, like I said. You're really only going to parse to get that pattern. Once you know the path, then all you're really changing is that index at points for each row or each portal row, and getting back your information. So I didn't really parse it, but just to kind of give you a clue what you might see. And I didn't use any custom functions or any other utilities, but I wanted to talk about a use case that you might have for that. And this happens to be some data I found on probably Community. It has sales data and in an array, and each month it has, the dollars and the sales. And it probably was used for a chart at one point, but I said, what if you did a query and this is what you got back? And you can parse it and you can get all that stuff, and you can use it directly for a chart or whatever you want. But I said, what if you actually wanted to say, I've got my year, I know my year, but I want to know the total dollars for that year. I would have to do something other than straight functions in JSON to get that total. And if it's scripted or whatever, great. Or you can use custom functions that allow you to do this. Let's cover that. JSON path might help you, or JSONata. I know Jeremy's helped work on that article. So there are utilities out there that allow you to actually do, here's my data. I don't necessarily want to parse it because I want to loop through and get that information with just a query. And so you can. Okay, so I wanted to do, again, an emphasis of the empty values. And it rearranged, which was fine. But in my calc, if you notice, I have the same number of keys as values, although it put in an empty for me, which I thought, oh, that's great. It's not at all like list function, which only uses the non-empty values. So I said, okay, I'm safe. And then I said, what if I use the 0 as an object name? Well, it's going to say no. So that wasn't right. And then I said, what if I use the object as text as a number? I said, well, that's fine. It works great. Gives me my values that I want in the path. So if I just do JSON get element and here's my actual path is that 0, it's fine. It reads it great. And I did the same thing, but I got to use the bracket notation to actually get the values. And I said, okay, let's tape a little further and see what happens. I've got an array with 2 elements in it with, again, our numbers. And so it gets a little confusing when you look at, well, what am I looking at? I know I've got an index, which is fine in my path. Then I've got an object key that has the number 0. And is that, did I do something wrong? Was that supposed to be a key? I don't know. And so I did the same thing. I did this with dot notation and this part with the bracket notation. And to me, if I'm going to use numbers as the object key, it just kind of made sense for me to go ahead and use that bracket notation, because I could understand that this part is an array index and this part is the object key. But I leave it up to you. Just again, this is just for testing all kinds of different things. I said, and there are some things that are automatic. The keyword true, no quotes is one for the Booleans, and false is the other for the other Boolean. And what get actually returned for that value is 1 or 0. And it's in the help, so it's not something I made up. So keep that in mind. What about null? There's also, you can use word null with no quotes. And in JSON, it doesn't care, except when I did my calcs. It totally didn't put that in my list values. I said, okay, I understand. And when I actually did my calcs, it returned me nothing because there was nothing to start with in that path. It's quoted as, it's not quoted, it's just null. And then for this one, it returned me a value, and it happened to have been quoted, so it's just the word null, not the actual object null. So another little gotcha to watch out for. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this little goodie, and I'm going to show you a couple tricks. Format. Let's just deal with the kids. We don't need any others. We're going to get the kids. And we want to get Sarah's age, and color, and name. And we're going to get the second kid, just the name. So again, you don't have to use this to get everything. I'm going to do a little trick here. So the calcs on Ethan is great. He's the second index. So index number 1 to give him his keys. I only asked for the name, so that's what I got back. Sarah, I asked for all of them. And that's great. And so I said, okay, now I've learned what key or index or path means. And these are all the paths. I said, can I now use that with set element? And I said, oh, yeah, of course I can. So let's say Sarah says, I'm 12. I don't want to be called by Sarah anymore. I want to use my middle name. So let's try to change that. And I'm just using a set element. Let's say update. And it indeed did change the JSON. Sarah now is called Betty by name. I didn't go back and change all the calcs for all the other things upstream. That still shows the original stuff. This still shows the original stuff. But again, my point was just to show you the changes that can happen. Let's go back to the JSON. So it changed that. I said, oh, you know what? She's 12. She can't decide what color she wants. So let's try that. And I'm not going to put a value in there. And so I kind of trapped, hey, you want to change something? Do you actually want to take the word purple out, but leave everything? I said, yeah, let's clear it. And again, it actually changed the JSON that I'm using. It has an empty value in there. So that's pretty cool. And I said, okay, I could actually change an entire path. So if I wanted to get rid of all of this, I could do that little empty thing, but I want to use the delete function. And the delete function only needs to know the JSON and the path. So let's go back to here's what it looks like. I want to say update the path. And it says, hey, you've got a whole object there you might be deleting. Are you sure? Yep. And I'm going to say empty because I'm going to get rid of it all. I'm going to say update. And do I want to clear it, which works, but I really want to use the delete JSON function. So I say delete. And he no longer is in the family. Again, I didn't go back and change all my calcs for each one of these paths. I mean, they're set once you set them, and you know, I can go back and I can delete it if I want, but it didn't change the original that I had in there when I got the calcs, which is fine. It's just a small demo. Okay, and then I did kind of a wrap up. Again, I got these resources. The notation is part of one of those links to the functions. It says that the dot is optional if to start with the root level, but again, there were some points where I found it was necessary. So you can use it or don't use it. It doesn't hurt whether you're using dot notation or bracket notation, not a problem. Okay, so some of my conclusions and tips. So I'm going to zoom this. Okay, reminders. Objects are an unordered list with a key or the name value pair. And it can be more than one. It always has the curly braces around an object. And if there's more than one, it has a comma delimited list. When you actually go to parse it, it reorders. But when you start out, it doesn't need to be ordered. Arrays are an ordered list of values. And it uses the 0 to start the index when you're counting. So 0, 1, 2, 3, not 1, 2, 3. 4. It's just start with 0 in your loop. Always has the square brackets around it. Again, it's comma separated if you have more than one index in that array. Both of these can have other objects or arrays and as part of their value. So you create an object, you get a value that you want to set to. It can be another object, an array, and they can be mixed within each of the lists. So JSON format elements, which is this, can be used to catch errors, but you don't have to use it all the way along. Once you formatted it at the beginning, it doesn't care. It compresses it all down when it actually does that calculation to get you the values or the keys. And so it doesn't have to be formatted. Emojis are valued as key names and values. But, if there happens to be an object key name, it's going to sort. So watch that out. Dots in the object, in the key names within the actual name itself has been fixed with versions 9.3.1 or greater if you use that bracket notation. And I did find that you can mix the dot and bracket notation. Works beautifully. Returns have a few gotchas within your processing, but it converts. If you convert it with format or have that within your JSON, it's correct. You just can't use that get value like we do for value lists or things that we create with the list function. So kind of a gotcha. I discovered that the dot may be necessary to start the path. And I found that, again, mostly in early versions before they added the bracket notation. Add them, don't add them. It works just fine. JSON list values doesn't ignore empty values. It leaves a placeholder if it can, but it can't read like you can with the get value. So if the number of keys don't match the number of values, then I, chose to little, alert show up. And the reason is because there could be returns in the values that it gets from that list values, or it could be a null value. So watch that out. The data API and execute FileMaker data API will escape the JSON for you. So it's great. You don't have to worry about it. Get at chunks of the elements once you know your path. There's a lot of repeating you're going to do to read it. The Booleans true and false evaluate to ones and zeros when you use JSON get element. And yes, I encourage you to test your path elsewhere. I mean, test your JSON if it works in here, test it somewhere else and see what you get. Once you know that path, and that's important, even when you get to actually working with JSON in let's see, working with it JSON within HTML or JavaScript. It's going to ask for a path a lot of times. And I had Bob upload this for y'all, so you can check it out, check the scripting. I didn't use custom functions, although there are a few in there if you want to try them. And just go from there. So enjoy. See if we have any questions.
Yeah, I have a question, Bev. Where do you find you're using JSON the most commonly? I mean, everybody, I think a lot of people have gone to using it to pass parameters when they're passing script parameters, but beyond that, like where have you found it really useful?
Very useful if you are taking something from one table to another. And for example, for the WidFM, I'm doing things where there are separate databases for different things, but we need to pass values amongst the different databases, depending on the committee. My committee works on this and your committee works on that. And so I was trying to come up with ways that I could pass information that needed to be in both places, like names or addresses or something like that. And making it into JSON made it very easy for me to use my fields and pass a JSON that made sense, so that I either used my field, like say person name, person first name or something. And when they get it on the other end, that their scripting can be reading that JSON and say, well, my field isn't person first name. My field is name, underscore first. And so you can use that set element, knowing the path that I've used to get to that element. You can set your field with that JSON and back and forth. And then the other thing was like the data API. At some point, there will be some that I said, okay, now I know the path. Again, I can create elements with it. So something that is fairly complex, you say, I just want to change one thing for whatever reason, and I want to read the JSON, but I only need to find this one element, this one object, or this one key index, and I'm just going to change one thing. If I know that full path, I can use that full path to actually set the element and not worry about it. So there are a couple of things. It's used in JavaScript. It's used in probably other applications that are, PHP uses JSON if you want. So I can see that the value of it's going to be pretty great, but you got to know that basic of what does that mean for that path. And this is kind of why I did it. Tony. Yes, I am doing it all scripts and no custom functions, and it's just all calculations. I haven't done any anything fancy other than using here's what FileMaker has given us for JSON functions. Because a lot of people stop at that point saying, I don't understand that. I don't get it. I don't know what this means. This is just kind of, again, a tool to sort of to teach you what all of that means. What happens if you do that JSON list keys? What do I get back? Well, this shows you. And so you kind of learn that.
Hey, Bev, what I saw, if my eyes do not deceive me, you basically, you've got a JSON structure and you're recursively traversing it and extracting all the keys. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, can I take that analysis or whatever, all of that information that you've recursively gathered and turn around and build a FileMaker script or a block of script steps to parse, so, you see an API, there's a big pile of JSON. I recursively traverse it, get all the keys, and then using the base elements plugin to write out XML, build a script.
Or JSON, writing XML or JSON?
The base element, write XML and then use the base elements plugin to convert that into FileMaker script steps. Anyway, what you did is very cool.
I gotcha. Yeah. And that was sort of the whole point, is that once you get that path and you understand how FileMaker itself is using it, and you can use it even within your own scripts, and you have a block and you want just that block, and you want to actually recreate it, but you're going to change the name, and so once you know that path, you can say JSON set element with, whatever you start your set element with, and then you supply that value and you supply that path, and you can give it whatever you say. It's a Boolean or it's text or it's, string or whatever. But because you know that path, you can use it actually to rebuild the JSON. If I took each one of those paths that I did in one of these and supplied different values when I did that JSON set element, because I know that path, I can create a chunk of JSON. So that was, again, one of the reasons.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
It opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, John, is there any way around escaping values in the data API? Why would you not want to escape them? John? No, not here. Okay. Hi, Danielle. Can key value pairs be stored in a tuple in JSON or only in an object array? I'm not sure what you mean by tuple at this point. You certainly can store just the JSON. So as I went down things and would get to like field data, and I said, okay, I'm only going to store that JSON I got back. I don't need to parse further for some point. Comments, there are no comments in JSON like there is in other things. And so I put in a little thing that said underscore comment, and I may not want to store it in, several fields. I may want to store the whole thing as JSON and then later go back and read it, because I can read it. And it's not that complex, or I can parse it further at that point. So Danielle, if you got something else, can you kind of explain? Nope. Since you're using it to move fields between tables, if you looked at JSON schema, yeah, and that's why I said there are ways to go beyond this, and so the whole point of this wasn't necessarily to go that next step. And I'm sure Jeremy's going to have some goodies for us, but a lot of people stop at that point when they look at these functions and say, I don't understand what that key or index or path means. What does it mean object? What does it mean array, and what is this dot notation? What is this bracket? They give you just a little bit of help and then go no further. So it gets a little confusing for some people. So, did you want to talk more about what you were asking, John Rosen? Why would you want to get around the escaping? He's on mute, or I don't know. Okay, so that's all the questions. Any more questions? Like I say, Bob has gotten a copy of this database for you to play with, pick apart, look at the scripting that I did. There are a couple scripts that I, had to go through 10 times to get it right. And so there are going to be some old, backup copies of scripts, but pretty
It's
much.
been added to the groups IO, so it's there for everybody to download.
Oh, good. Okay. And, I did some things with some navigation, just again, to make it easy for me to not have to type the path each time and test it, and, to sort of make it a little, just give me the elements I want to get. I don't need all of it. I just want to see what happens if I have this path. And so I kind of give that to you. So any further questions? I think we're done.
John's come back to us in the chat.
Pardon me?
John responded to you. He said the reason why he would not want to, or why he would want to avoid escaping, is just for simplicity.
Well, if you're going to process it, you want to have it escape. If you're going to process it as JSON, you want to keep it escape. You can do that JSON format elements, and it's not going to change it any. But if you're going to store it as JSON or use it in JavaScript, or you're going to use it with these functions, you've got to keep it as escaped. Otherwise, it's going to be really nasty.
Okay, thank you.
Try it. Okay.
I will.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks, Bev. That was really that was a great in-depth deep dive on at least the fundamentals of JSON, and I think beyond that too. Really good stuff, and thank you for providing this tool for helping us parse the JSON. I think that's great.
And everything but the JSON query and the plugins, I'll let you research that. So
thank you, Bev.
You're welcome.
All right, great. I'm going to start recording before I did that. Oh well, we'll get it in there next month. Anyway, so it's 11:30, and it is time for perhaps one of the most prepared presenters we've ever had, as far as work that he's done up front. And he even has a supporting cast. So I think add a little music and you've got an off-Broadway show, Jeremy.
There's lights behind me, so we're ready to go.
There you go. You've already got the background. It's looking good. Looking good for that Broadway show. So anyway, Jeremy is going to share some insights on JavaScript and dashboards, and I'm really looking forward to this. And Jeremy, it's all for you.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today, and thanks for letting me be here. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. Instead of me sharing my screen, hopefully this will work. Instead of me sharing my screen, if you could pin me or click on speaker view or something, I think that's how we're going to do it. I'm using a virtual camera. We're going to try some switching of scenes and stuff to make it, there's nothing more awkward than switching between slides and FileMaker. We all have struggled with that. So I'm going to experiment with this and see if it works. So y'all all can see me in my bright shiny forehead. All right. So welcome everybody. Today we're going to take a look at working with dashboards. I'm interested in this because it's come up throughout the years that I've been in FileMaker, and I think people have been trying to figure it out for quite a while. There's a lot of history around this, but I think that with whatever we have that's new, FileMaker 19, it's worth exploring and seeing what is capable. So we're going to do that. Got a lot on the agenda. And by the way, let me know if you ever can't read something. You'll be able to ping me in a certain way. And I know I've got some Confederates in the audience that will tell me if things are bad. Text is blurry. Sorry about that. If you can't see that, I'll just tell you what it is. Shoot, we'll try this and see. So we got a lot going on. We're going to talk about dashboards. We're going to talk about the definition of them. We're going to work with the types of dashboards and the dashboard data. We're going to, we got a special guest that's going to talk to us about working with clients in extracting out dashboard information. And we're going to take a look at how dashboards and how charts are constructed, both with FileMaker things and with JavaScript things. This is going to be an interactive session. So if you would, there's two ways to do this. I sent out through the FMDiSC thing a little survey that I would love for you to try if you haven't done. What you can do throughout this session is either scan that QR code with your phone, or go to that URL slido.com and type in the conference or the session keyword there. And up will pop a survey. And so if you haven't done that, it would be great if you could do that. This is how we're going to interact today and see if this can happen. We've got a lot of little polls, a lot of questions to ask. There's so go ahead and do that. Log in here if you haven't done this already, and go ahead and answer these questions. We've got 5 or 6 questions here that I'm interested in getting your response from. Take a moment to do that.
How many previous responses did you get? Because I pre-did mine.
Then that's fine. You can wait. I got about 20 people started to answer it. We didn't get them all the way through, but that's okay. If you already did it, that's great. I'll just keep this going for just a little bit longer, and then we'll move on. But I mean, this was actually helpful because it helped me kind of see where we were at as a group. I'm sure people who are not here participated in it, but yeah, I'd encourage you to have some fun with this and click in there and answer the questions. Is anybody having trouble getting in? All right. So of the people who've responded, I'll keep this going for a little bit. There was some simple questions. What experience have you had building dashboards? Most of us are in the occasional to never built them. That's good. I would not even say that I'm an expert at building dashboards. It takes some mental effort and physical effort too, probably. I'll come back to that in a bit. Here's a question that I was interested. What have you used to build dashboards? Was interested in how what people are using, and so I'm getting a good amount of responses here. Y'all can see this, right? Martha, does it look okay? You can see this at least, right?
Yep, you're good.
Great. Okay, there we go. Very good. We got chart tool. We got some portals and graphs. Outsourcing it. There's some JavaScript mentions in here. That's great. No JavaScript ones at all. Use a data warehouse to summarize. Very nice. And I think you can see the responses in there too. I'm not sure if you can, but there we go. You can. Great. Thank you, Barbara. She's giving me on real-time feedback. All right, let me go back to the first one and see. Oh, there we go. We jumped up quite a bit. So, there's a couple people great that feel very confident in building these. Wonderful. Thank you for being a part of this. I think this is fun to do. I did teach 5th grade a long time ago, so I still have that in me. So, it's okay though if you need to go to the bathroom during my session. I'm not going to be upset. All right, so let's keep on going here. Here's an interesting question. Choose the phrases describing your thoughts. Okay. Overwhelmingly at the moment, people are suggesting that it's so far a positive experience working with dashboards. Good. Okay. I like the middle one there is an interesting phrase. Dashboards are misdesigned. I think that's part of the problem with them. We'll see as we go along. Let's see. Let's go back and see if we got any more XM chart plugin. That's great. All right. So I'm gonna go forward here. The focus of the session will be on building dashboards for FileMaker apps. I asked for a ranking of the topics that I've got in here. And it looks like building dashboards with JavaScript is a high priority. And types of dashboards. Good. All right. Let's keep on going. Take a look. There's a lot of methods for gathering data for charts. That's a pretty important, part of working with dashboards is to get the data. So it's fun to see the different methods, and we'll talk through them. There we go. Okay. And what is your understanding of a data warehouse? We're going to take a look at this idea. All right. Let's see what else we got. We'll talk about this, and I'll bring this into the conversation in a little bit. What resources have you learned? Paste them here. We'll share them with the group. So there's a lot of, that FM Academy talk. I actually will bring that up from a couple. It was like 10 years ago now, but yes, I get what you're saying. So there's a lot of good responses about the resources that people have used. So there we go. Great. All right. So I think that'll stay. I'm not sure if it'll stay active. Probably not. Let me just go through it one more time. This is fun. We'll figure it out. All right. I'll speed through them again, see if there's anything. All right. Good. All right. This is great. Thank you for responding. All right. Let's keep on moving here. We are going to do a lot of interaction along with the questions that I sometimes will throw at you all. There's a place for you to put in questions as well. So there's on the top of your phone tab, there's a Q&A section. You can put a question in there and it will pop up and it will be shared with the other people who are logged in here. So please feel free throughout this entire session, be throwing questions in there, and at various times we'll stop and see what questions are coming. All right. All right. So then here is my overall goal in this session. I hope you can read this. If not, I will read it to you. I want to review the methods of creating charts and getting data so that we can make better choices about how to build a dashboard for clients. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take a look even at FileMaker chart objects and see what's going on there. My personal goal, and you all may know this, is that I think JavaScript is, when it comes to dashboards especially, that it's the way to go. There's too much that a JavaScript chart has that we can't ignore anymore for our clients. It's not to say FileMaker charts are not useful. I've seen plenty of uses of them, and I think I've used them a few times myself. But that's my goal. During this time, I hope to scare you a little bit, but also make visible the way forward in how to get working with JavaScript dashboards if you've never done that. And those of you who have lots of experience with JavaScript dashboards, I would love for you to put in the ideas section, you can shout out other things that I'm not bringing up throughout this time. Let's just jump right in with another question here. What is how familiar are you working with a FileMaker chart object? And I think there's like 3 questions in there. So if you would take a moment and get some responses going in there. Nice. There's about a fourth of us are not at all familiar with working for FileMaker chart objects. That's interesting to me. I wonder if those people have like skipped right up to the JavaScript stage. Feel free to speak up or post that in the ideas or the questions if you had. Kind of wish I had. All right, let's see if there's other responses here. JavaScript charting, a lot of us. Oh, okay, so it's kind of inverse. Over half of us. Only a couple of us are very well familiar with that. All right, nice. This is kind of fun to be able to hear what you all have to say real time. So I do not have questions about my shirt in this, so there's no judging going on in this. All right, so thank you for the responses. I think it shuts off if I move away from this, so I got to get used to this. So I'll give us about 45 seconds to a minute to answer these questions, and then we'll go on here. All right, so I want to show you the environment that I'm working in is sort of a setup for the entire JavaScript portion. I want to put it at the beginning just so you see what's happening. And this is a real interesting chance to see how it looks on your screen. So this is kind of my beta test here. This, what you see in front of you, is is exactly the environment that I'm using to write JavaScript, and in this case, to work with a dashboard. I've got over here, I've got a VS Code editor that has my HTML and my JavaScript in it. Over here is a FileMaker file, pretty standard stuff. And by connecting these two, I can do coding over here in JavaScript and see it happen over here. And I'm gonna do that now. In the terminal area of this, I'm going to type a little command called npm start. You may not be able to see it. That's okay. It's not the focus of this session to talk about npm and all this stuff. But what that did is it started. Let me try something here because that's not going to be good. Actually, I'm going to quit VS Code for a moment. And I'm going to start it back up because. So over here in the FileMaker file, we'll let this get going again, reboot itself. Let's see, hopefully this will work. The way that I set this up, this demo file, nicely, very well done by Miss Martha Zink. She's with us today. Hi, Martha. And this is just a place for me to demo the stuff. So if I connect it, let me try this again, see if this will connect correctly. Yep, okay, it did. All right, good. So now I can go over here and I can toggle this dev mode and turn it on. And if I go into, say, the Apex dashboard, I see it rendering here. Now I can go over into the code that is right here in this folder. You probably can't see this, that's okay. I know this is, I'll see if I can update that. So I can go in here and I can change something in the JavaScript itself. And when I Command S it, save it, it automatically re-renders over in FileMaker. So I can see the connection right away, and it helps me to know exactly how it's going to work in FileMaker right from the beginning. So that is my environment. If you have a question about it, please put that in to the polling service, and I'll be glad to answer it. But I am working on blog posts and stuff about this. I've got a whole nother set up for just generic JavaScript, not working with dashboards. Okay, so let's keep on going. I want to take a look now at the definition of working with dashboards And I'm getting this from one of my books that I've got. It's called, I'll show you here. It's called Information Dashboard Design, the Effective Visual Communication of Data. By Stephen Few. He's got quite a few books on working with dashboards and visual design. So his definition I felt was pretty interesting. It says, I'll let you read that, if you can read that, hopefully. It's a visual display of the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives, which fits entirely on a single computer screen, so it can be monitored at a glance. All right. I think that's an interesting definition, and I've actually constructed it the exact way from the book, page 34. And the way that it's constructed here points out what's important. So I'm curious for you, given this definition, which parts of that definition really strikes you? Nice. Okay. The idea that it fits entirely on a computer screen, I find, is a pretty interesting idea. And this book was written 10 or so years ago. Maybe things are different now. So it'd be worth investigating that to see if there's any effective dashboards that are multiple pages, or you have to scroll through, especially using a web viewer. All right. So far, by far, the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives. That's an interesting, and I like that idea, one or more objectives. Like maybe it could be one objective. Maybe there's just a dashboard that contains a single data point, chart or bar or graph or something that can alert the user to that information. Very good. And of course, the visual display is the least interesting to us, which I'm interested in, because visual display, I think we think of charts or graphs only, bar graphs, slick colored portals or list views or whatever. So visual is definitely part of it. And Chris Moyer here, he says, I quibble a bit with the needed to achieve part, because I think it perfectly valid for dashboards to be diagnostic, monitoring nature. Yeah, I agree with you. Of dashboards. So it's interesting to think, like, need to achieve one or more. So maybe monitoring, there is some sort of achievement that you have to do there. Like you need to know when the server goes down or something. Maybe we could broadly use the word achieve to say when you need to know something. All right, let's keep on going. So I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions. There we go. That's good. Thank you for doing that. There's some great questions about the environment, the JavaScript development environment. Yep, I am. We'll get to that at some point. But yes, so there we go. We have that starting. That's why I wanted to put it at the beginning, so it's kind of cool and less distracting as we go later on. I'd like to see more multi-tiered dashboards designed for initiating button-driven workflows, home assistant, systems control. Oh, that's a very interesting idea as far as creating dashboards for the 2020s. Yeah, I'm replacing, there's another question at the bottom there, if you can read that. I'm replacing a report on revenues for a client with a dashboard. Performance is poor, takes too long to find SQL or storing historical data in records. Great. I mean, not great that happens, but great that you brought that up, because then we can do that. What library do you use to build an auto refresh? I'll save that for later. Looks like somebody withdraw that question, or I don't know where it went. All right, well, let's keep on going. Hopefully I can answer some of those questions during this time. Start off with types of dashboards. Here, I think in this book, from this book, he identifies 3 kinds of dashboards. And I think one of these, at least, we'll get to Chris's quibble. strategic, analytical, operational dashboards. Obviously, dashboards and charts and visual displays can be categorized other ways. I like these three because it actually describes a lot of what we do as FileMaker developers, the problems that we solve for our clients. So let's keep on going here. Here is the definition of strategic. Here are some ideas for strategic. I hope I'm not getting any indication that it's too blurry for you to read, so I'm not going to read them all to you. Waiting. Nope. Good. Okay. Oh, I'm good. All right. Thank you, Martha. I'll tell you how this. Thank you, Martha, for solving this problem here. So this is a definition of strategic. It's very simple. There's high-level details. No interaction is necessary. I find that an interesting idea. So, FileMaker charts are great for an executive strategic kind of dashboard where it simply displays the overall state of the data. There we go. So that's one kind of dashboard. The second kind is working with analytics. This is where, you want to kind of drill down and maybe produce a lot of content, a lot of charting that shows the more details, because this is analytical. It's meant to help people understand or learn something about what is happening. So we've got, it's be highly detailed. It's some monitoring, there's comparisons. And when we get to the charting, actually, I want to talk about that comparison in particular. And it's interactive, like I said. All right. And the third one, operational. This is probably, Chris, this is probably along the Zabbix line, I think. Maintain awareness of activities and events that are constantly changing and require attention and response immediately. So I think maybe that's where the author of this book and where I'm getting this information talks about it, achieve something, is you need to respond to something as quick as possible. And they should be simple in design, shouldn't be a whole lot to them because they need to be focused on one thing. I don't recall the dashboard of Zabbix. Chris, is it pretty simple, or is it a pretty complex one? You can answer, and it can be very complex. Okay, so that's an interesting idea, but we certainly wouldn't want a flight traffic controller having a crazy dashboard with tons of. I actually don't know if that's the case. Maybe they have huge. Maybe they have many screens with one piece of data on each. That's an interesting idea. All right, so what types have you built? I didn't put a none in here. Sorry about that. All right. All right, let's keep going here. Thanks for the responses there. We got, most of us have built, or a majority of us have built analytical, as well as some of the others. All right, let's keep going here. Let's take a look, see if there's any more questions. It looks like these are the same ones as before. This one's got some good upvotes, so that's great. It's definitely worth talking about when we get to the data section. Hopefully I can shed some light on that in this time. All right, so then we're going to take a look at typical dashboard data. Going through this pretty quickly because I think it's important for the background of working with the JavaScript stuff. Here are typical dashboard data that we would put on there. Not only totals, of course, we want to put some totals there, like the total number of students in a school over the last years, or whatever, but we can also put these kinds of things on there as well. variations in timing, where we're showing like year to date, month to date. And we got that. We have some comparison ones where, again, we're comparing two sets of data to see either we're going to see those in a two different bars, or we're going to see them just the result of the comparison. So like, what was the number of sales at this point last year compared to this year? How many students have applied for our school over the years? Some comparison there. Evaluation, this is interesting, where you're just looking at to see if something is good or bad, where you're making a judgment, you're letting the data give you information about a judgment to make. And often dashboards, often data with these kind of, often data is color coded in certain ways, red, yellow, green, possibly, or something, so that you can provide immediate visual feedback. And then the last one is interesting too. It's non-quantitative, where you're simply putting up on the dashboard a list or a number of, like, for example, a number of students that haven't yet brought back their applications. It's just a number. It's just showing you that, or it could be a top 10 list. It could be the tasks that one has to do, and so forth. So these are typical pieces of data that we would put on there. And I just went through all this, so I'm gonna skip through this. There we go. All right. So back to the polling. What types of data have you included in dashboards? Good point, Chris. Sorry about that. I forgot to change it. I'm going to see if I can change it actually while you're doing that. Sorry, you can only choose one at the moment. If I have a chance, I'm going to try to get in there and update it. I don't know what that will do to the questions, but let's see here. Can I edit this? Edit. Oh yeah, it should be allow you to do that. All right. So you can select multiple ones if you'd like. The last one was ready. Okay, thank you. All right, let's keep on going. Very nice, thank you. I like the idea of the non-quantitative because it gives some like creativity to it. You know, dashboards can be very boring looking, possibly, and just dry numbers. So non-quantitative is interesting. All right. Let's take a look, see if we got any more questions. We're still, nope, we're good. All right, please put your questions in there as you need to. We're kind of just going through that. All right. So now we're going to take a look at, we're going to talk briefly about what the client wants. And to do that, I am going to bring in a guest speaker, and that is Miss Martha Zink is joining us today. Hi, Martha. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Very good. Well, welcome. Why don't you share your screen and let's see what you have to say.
Awesome. Thanks for letting me present with you. All right, so I get to do the part where I tell you about how to actually ask the right questions and what you want to figure out about your client, what you want to figure out about what your clients want around a dashboard. Is everyone seeing my screen okay? Jeremy, can get a thumbs up from you? Perfect.
Yes.
All right, so using this cool tool that Jeremy's given us, what has been your experience working with clients in creating dashboards? And really there's a mix of positives and negatives here, or some in the middle there, but curious to know what experience you've had in the past. It's fun to watch these pop up on the screen as we talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds about right. And I think if we swapped out creating dashboards to creating a database or a software, or just generally software, we'd probably feel somewhat similarly. When Jeremy and I were talking about this presentation, a lot of what we kept saying was, well, this applies to like regular FileMaker development, right? Or yeah, this applies to software development. So this is spot on, and I think a lot of us have felt the pain here on this kind of stuff. All right, so let's see, let me keep going here. I think the very first thing, and this is true of software, but it's especially important for dashboards, is to ask just a ton of questions. There's really no reason to leave any room for doubt. So one of the very first things I want to know is, who is going to use this dashboard? Who is it for? It's very different, and it goes back to the things that Jeremy was talking about, with the different types of dashboards that you can have. Is it tactical? Is it something that lets you know how operations is doing, how many orders are in flight, where things are in the current process? That might be live data that you need to act on right away. Something else might be an executive dashboard, where they might look at once a week just to see how the business is doing. They might look at cash flow or what money's coming in or going out. And the follow-up question to that is, what are you going to do with this data? So it's one thing to say, I want a pretty dashboard. It's another thing to say, here's how this is going to help me with my job or other people's jobs, the people that report to me, things like that. Something else is, and this is really how I usually start the conversation, it's, what questions are you trying to answer? Without knowing what the goal is, and everything on a dashboard should have a purpose. It's really easy to get distracted by something visual because it can be pretty and because it can look nice, but really every piece of that should tell you something. And then I struggled with how to write this question. I usually do it graphically, which I'll do in a second here, which is, do you need to see it or do you need to analyze it? So whatever data you're asking for, what are you going to do with it? And so this is what I mean by that. Dashboards have been a bit exploited as only charts, and that's probably half of the story. In a lot of cases, a chart can be extremely useful when you're doing things like looking at something over time, or when a pie chart it's the best tool to communicate something. But sometimes you just want a number, and that's totally acceptable to just say there are 35 pending orders, there are 72 orders in production. It goes back to the definition, right? It should be concise, and it should be a single page, and it should give you the data that you need. Jeremy and I were talking about dashboards and some of the things that people ask for, but versus what they really need. Sometimes they just want to know the difference among things, right? So instead of showing a bar chart that where the user is now responsible for comparing the two bars, maybe you just show what the percent of change is, right? So here it is year over year, or here's how our sales are better this year, or whatever it might be. So step one is ask questions. Step two is ask more questions. Where is the data coming from? And this is a little bit of thinking practically. It's very easy to ask for everything under the sun. But when you start being really tactical and saying, where would I get this data? How would I do this today? And whether that's it might be the executive who's going to figure that out, or they might actually task that out to somebody. But the important thing is to be able to look at the data and very methodically walk through it and know exactly what it is that you would have to do to get that data. A big one is making sure that the data is ready to be reported on. This is a data cleanliness issue, and then who's going to maintain that? Hopefully, we all hope that with our FileMaker solutions, we've got really good and clean data. Sometimes that doesn't happen, right? There are a bunch of reasons why data might not be as great as we want it to be. But it's important to come into the dashboard conversation knowing that there's some process or cleanup that might need to happen. And I know Jeremy's going to talk about data warehousing, but it's important to also ask, how up to date does the data need to be? Does the executive need the up-to-date information, or is everything as of last week good enough? Or what about 10 minutes ago? Or what about yesterday? If you're looking at something like if you think of something like Google Analytics and web traffic, you may not you may not need today's information, right? It might be irrelevant. So you might be okay with yesterday. Once you've asked a lot of questions, the next thing I suggest is show them. So I think go for as many wireframes as you can. I know in the past I've created wireframes where the data is fake, but the type of visual is accurate. And when I show it to them, I say, does this make sense to you? Can you figure out the answer to your question by looking at this? And it's amazing the responses you'll get. Some people don't like stacked bar charts. Some people don't like pie charts. Some people, there's just so many ways to visualize one form of data, and your audience might just not vibe with it, or it doesn't make sense, or it's too complicated. So I think creating some type of, I call it write-fi, right? Is it lo-fi? Is it just on a piece of paper? Maybe. Is it a really clean, cleaned up, maybe in FileMaker or maybe in some software, hi-fi version of it? Maybe. I think it's a matter of who your audience is and who your users are. But it really comes down to, does this answer your question? Can you answer your question if this was the data that I gave you? And it's okay to get it wrong. I think this is the time where you want to get it wrong. Better to do it now than when you're doing a ton of development and a bunch of gathering data, storing data, cleaning up data, only to prove that the way that you thought you wanted to do it isn't going to fit the mold. So like a lot of things, keep it simple, keep the scope as small as possible. Remind your future user of the dashboard that this is just a puzzle piece, and a dashboard is just a bunch of puzzle pieces. So start small, pick a couple of pieces that you want to show visually and really explore those and make sure they're thorough. What happens when you click on a point on the bar chart or on the line chart? What happens if I'm looking at a table of data? What happens if I see a number and I click on the number? Those are things that you might want to think through. And so taking that first step, creating that part of the dashboard and really digging in, I think is better than going too wide and having 10 objects on that dashboard. And then it becomes a little overwhelming, and it's hard to really focus on what questions you're trying to answer. They can change over time. And so really it's all about version 1. And I said it at the beginning, but just don't be afraid to ask for more detail. I think that when it comes to dashboards, because it's such a visual tool and we as users all have different ideas of what that looks like, I think taking the time to really understand it and doing the wireframing up front can really be helpful. The clearer it is for you and the clearer it is on paper or in a mock-up, the easier it will be to develop it. So take the time to visualize it together. And I didn't even ask Jeremy if this was okay, but I'm going to do it anyway, which is if you want to talk any more about this, Jeremy and I are both planning to be at Pause on Error in October. So we hope that we can have some chats about dashboards. Maybe Jeremy can dig into some JavaScript code. We can talk a little bit about some other tools, but there's a lot to talk about here.
Cool. Great. Let's see. Do we have any more questions there? Don't think so.
I think so. Nope. That looks about right.
Very nice. All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Martha. I'm going to let you see me again. I'll let you see me and the slides this time, just for the difference, the fun of it. All right. So please bring those questions in. I assume that I hope we'll get more questions as we talk through here. So we're going to take a look at how charts are constructed. And I have like 20 slides for this about FileMaker charts. And that was the last chosen topic on the list. So I'm going to go pretty quickly. And I hope to just bring up some thoughts about this, because there were some people that weren't quite familiar with it. The chart setup in FileMaker there's a chart setup dialog. There's a chart object that we can use. It's found in the toolbar, and it looks like this. It's pretty, actually, for what it is, it's actually a pretty comprehensive tool. And I think for a while it confuses people until suddenly it just doesn't. It's like, okay, oh, now I understand what to put in each of these areas. I went back in history and found the first one that came out. I'm sure some of you used this way back when. It actually has most of what the current one has, but it's an interesting look. I think this one had a lot fewer charts. The current one has quite a few more than this one. So ultimately, when it comes to working with charts in FileMaker, ultimately this chart object expects a list of data from a source, from somewhere. So conceptually, if we think about it like that, that's breakdown pretty simple about what it is. You can see, hopefully see in this example there, that the x-axis has a list of data using the Pilcrow to separate the months into 4 different values. And the data in the series does as well. So ultimately we need a list, and we can get the list in 3 different ways. We can work with the current found set in this data source tab of the chart object. We can work with a current found set, a current record, and related records. Here's what it looks like when we are working with the current found set of records. You can see on the left there's 480 records, and I put the chart up in the header part of the list view, and all of the records are viewed, are charted. If I do a found set, which is the one on the right, and only 12 records show up, I search for like the year 2011, and I search for bananas. Now it's much more comprehensible. We also can work with charts in summary, with summary data. We can put them in various, well, in this case, we're just working with the current found set, but we're summarizing it. And I said that I put the first chart up in the header. I can also put a chart in each of the summary parts of a report format of a chart, and I get different results. You can see the same chart object. There's two separate chart objects in different parts, but they produce different results based on where they are at in the report. And you know, I'm not giving away anything, but if you ever take your certification test, you might want to study something like this. So we've got there, the bottom there of that summary part 2010, you only see the records for 2010, but above you're seeing a chart of all the records. So it works nicely. We can also work with related records. Here is an example of working with related records. The source is the related records, and really the chart is just pulling a list, just like the list function or other functions do. So we can pull a list, and in this case, I'm actually using a field with global storage up there, the radio buttons, to tell the relationship which years of data to show. So if I flip back and forth between these, I'm getting different charted results. And of course, and the one that I find the most interesting and work with the most for the chart object is simply a list of data, the current record with the limited data. Here I have 2 fields, and the values in those are plotted on the chart. In fact, that's the one we use when we use any kind of calculations to extract and get the data for the chart. So let me ask you this. This is an open text thing. I would like you to just put in a word or two, a phrase of what is the greatest advantage of using a FileMaker chart object? Either the service is broken or there are no advantages. Oh, there we go. Okay. Nice. All right, I'm gonna let this go just a little bit longer. I think I've said this before. I think that it's a perfectly fine thing to use, object to use. I know CEOs of companies of FileMaker development shops that use the FileMaker chart object to display summary data of their company for them in various company meetings. All right. Is it native? Struggling for the positives. Okay. It's it does become simple. It is really simple to work with, provided you can get the data in the right structure. And I think that's where it has a disadvantage, but the disadvantage is also present in JavaScripting stuff as well. All right, thank you for your responses. Let's keep on going. I don't have any more questions. We'll keep on going. All right, so in JavaScript, we're going to take a look at how these are created. And I'm going to now switch to, we'll see how this goes here. This is working with JavaScript to create charts. And we're just going to focus on one chart for a little bit. I'm trying to walk you through this as we go. First thing is that this is set up as a simple HTML document that contains, ultimately, I have some structure around it, which we will talk about later, but ultimately I have a div element here in my HTML that has an ID that's set to chart. That's the structure. And then down here, I've got a link to my index file, my JavaScript file that I am working with. I know this is going to be high level. I don't expect you to be experts in this, but hopefully I can shed enough light on this that you can go, oh yeah, this is understandable. In the index.js file, I am simply, the first thing I'm doing is I'm actually importing a JavaScript library to do this work. I'm using, in this example, I'm using Apex charts to run this. There are lots of other great ones, and I've got a couple other examples. And I'm just importing it in here so that it's part of this JavaScript, and everything below this can access all of the libraries and all of the functions in here. I don't particularly know what it's stored here in this node modules folder. I don't actually know. Let's see if I can find it here. You can't see it anyway. I'm going to try to bring it up. Yeah. You might not be able to see this, but there's a lot of trying to find. So here is the Apex library. This is part of it here. Don't understand any of this. It's all minified. It's inlined. There's no spaces. So it's not important for me to know. All I know is that I can use it in my functions in my JavaScript. So I've got it imported. And then I have a variable of options here that I can use. I can set some options to be whatever I want it to be. In this case, I've got a title that says sample data. I'm choosing to do a bar graph. Here's my data series and my x-axis. And there's a ton more options here. It's not just these options that I have. There's thousands of options, hundreds probably, that you can access via the Apex charts library. We'll bring it up in a little bit. And finally, well, there's last two things is I'm simply telling the JavaScript down here in this line, I'm telling the JavaScript, I'm saying, hey, I want you to take all of those options that I set, and I want you to run it through your Apex functions in somewhere in that inline list. And I want you to attach it to a certain div that I tell you to. All right, so that's all this line does. It just gets the right div that we want, and we pass it some options. And then the final line is to render it. We run a function called render, and it renders it. So that's, at the very basic, that is really simple. It's just a few lines of HTML here, and it's a few lines of JavaScript. And I'm sure some people are going to ask, is this available? I can make it available. There's some learning that we'll have to do, but that's okay. And you don't, yeah. If you're interested in this, we'll talk about that at the very end and see if we can find an arrangement. This is the simplest way to get a JavaScript chart running. If I were to come in here like I did this and I make any change, I can see it rendered over here. I could actually go into, I could go and open up the Apex chart library. Let's get that visible here. I could go over here to the Apex chart library, and I could say, you know what, I want to pick some colors because that blue doesn't really work. So I could find an option that tells me the colors to use. And we're going to see if this works here. I'm looking for an example. This might, I'm not sure actually if that will work. We'll have to, let's see, I'm going to go to options and I'm going to try to find colors. For example, there's a ton of possible options. I picked the one that might be the hardest to get started with. All right, so here it is. I think I can do this. So let's try this. I'm just going to try it and see. I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to go over to VS Code here. And I'm going to try this. I'm just not sure if this is going to work. Let's put it right there. Does that work? Nope, that's not going to work. All right, so maybe the wrong place for it. It's just worth, it may be in the series here. Maybe I need to put it in the series. I don't know where it goes. I'll have to figure out where it goes. But we have the chance to work with different options to make updates to anything that we want on this chart. So that's how, at the very basic, how JavaScript charts are working, how they work, and how we can set them up. Nothing new to this. I think it's pretty well established. There's a lot of examples out there about this, but I wanted to just break it down to the very basic for those of you who have never seen this or working with it, have worked with it. It's not that difficult to sort of parse out and understand what is going on here. Let's keep on going here. So let's curious. This is a silly quick start question, but what just what I've shown you so far, what is the rate the scariness of working with JavaScript to you? All right, looking not too bad. 2.7, that's not awful. My goal by the time I retire is to get this number down to to a 1. Is a result of these survey questions a dashboard? Oh, I think so. Yeah, very good. All right, 18 people have responded. Thank you. We're at a 4. Most of us are at a 4. A third of us. Like I said, I want to help bring this number down because JavaScript is just too important, and it's actually not that scary. It just takes some understanding. So I want to be able to help. All right, we do have some more questions. Are there evil JavaScript libraries? One that embeds malicious code. How do we know we can trust all the gobbledygook? Good question. I appreciate that question. And I have a response. And I may, if I can, it'd be awesome to, to ping Todd and see, but I'll get this. So I'm going to pretend I'm Todd. So let's see here. JavaScript libraries are not things that are written in silos. They're not written by one person on the dark web and then the whole world downloads them. They are put up usually in GitHub, in NPM, which is Node Package Manager, and thousands of people download them and take a look at them. And if the library works for them, it is rated high in those services, GitHub, and so forth. So you could go to any library and you could look at its rating. You could look at how many people are downloading it on a given week. You could look at the issues that are coming up and seeing if anybody brings up that this, drained my bank account as I was using it. As far as in FileMaker, there is a complete wall between this. No JavaScript can touch FileMaker data without a script. That's one of the reasons why I think yeah. So I'm not gonna say that. So we're pretty safe, and people like me and lots of people here who have used JavaScript charts, we know which ones are easy to work with and have not gunked up our system in any way. So I don't know if there are evil JavaScript libraries. I assume they're at the -1 rating in GitHub, so I would avoid those. And of course, one last thing is you want to look for libraries that are actively worked on by the author and the authors. If they haven't touched it for 4 or 5 years, it's probably time to find something else to work on. Okay, so let's keep on going. This is an interesting idea, getting data for the chart. I think this is a big part of any chart. You have to think about how to get the data. We have to think about how to, and in some cases, we have to think about how to configure it and work with it to make it work. So here is an example. You may not be able to see this very well. This is data in my dashboard here. And it's a bunch of student records from our EDU stuff. There's nothing identifying in here, but it just shows the process that students are going through each year to apply for the school and all of the steps that they go through. So we need to get the data out of this chart both for FileMaker and for JavaScript. No matter which tool you pick up, you still have the worst struggle of getting the data to be correct and getting it to work for FileMaker. You don't want to graph 55,000 records using FileMaker's charting objects. So somehow you have to work with the data and get it configured the right way. You have to get a list of the x-axis values, you have to get a list of the y-axis values, and you have to stick them into the chart objects. Same true for JavaScript. The Apex chart library requires a data set that looks like this as one of the examples, and where you've got it in 2 separate areas. What I personally, and I think I'm hoping people see from now on, is that the JavaScript data needs are usually arrays. They're usually arrays of numbers or text like January, February, March, and so forth, or they're arrays of objects. So since FileMaker 16, we've been working with JSON. It's become part of our blood. It's become part of how we work. So that's why I'm leaning towards the idea of working with what's one of the reasons why I work with JavaScript charts. So let's ask you this. In what ways have you collected summary data? Typically, charts are going to do summary data. I said that. How do you collect the summary data, both the categories for the x-axis and the values for the y-axis, if applicable? Go ahead and put in 1 or 2 methods that you have collected the summary data. All right. Very good. So a lot of typical ways that we collect the data. Nice. All right, I'll give one more chance, a couple more seconds to respond, and then we'll move on. This is the toughest part. It's the part that people struggle with the most, both with JavaScript charts and with FileMaker charts. So it's worth exploring that in depth. We don't have time here. I'll show some ways that I'm doing for these particular ones. Prayed real hard. Okay. Summary fields. That's a, yeah. Okay. I think at some point it'd be great to have a symposium on just data collection for charts, just a gathering together and just coming up and illustrating ways to gather data for charts. I'm pretty confident that ways that you gather data for charts could apply to both the FileMaker charts and the JavaScript charts in most cases. All right, very good. Thank you. Let's keep on moving. There's lots of possible ways, and with the caveat, of course, that the data must be configured in some way. So let's give this a try. We're going to go back to FileMaker in this case. I'll put me in there. Hi. There we go. I have this data. I have not the data warehouse yet. We'll take a look at that in a bit. I have all of this data, the 55,000 records here. And I'm interested in, for a chart, actually, I've got a chart right here. I've got a chart here, and I want to actually collect the data for this chart to, from the 55,000 records. I want to somehow summarize it, or I want to work with it in some way. The most common response was working with execute SQL, and I think that's an interesting way to do it. The person out there who mentioned they're putting a dashboard together and they're using they have slow performance. I'm not sure if you're using execute SQL, but we'll see how it goes with this. So I'm going to use execute SQL here for this, and just quickly create collect data for the x-axis and for the y-axis. I want to be able to, what I'm going to do is based on the, I got to be clear with what I'm looking at. For a particular year, I want to count the number of students that were in a particular status right here. So these two right here. So for 2012, I want to know how many students were withdrawn, for example. I could easily, through a script, I could easily do finds and then store that data somewhere. But for this, I'm just going to create a quick execute SQL statement. And I'm going to break all of the rules that my team and I talk about when it comes to working with, with FileMaker. And I'm going to hard code the execute SQL statement. So let's bring it back up. There we go. All right. Boom. Nope, not there. Boom, boom. There we go. Okay, so there's my data warehouse. We'll take a look at that later. All right, so layout mode again. Open this up, and I'm just going to create a quick execute SQL statement. Boom, right there. So here, I'm sorry if you were not going to be able to see this. I'm going to read it to you. It says, execute SQL, select distinct status from final admissions data, that table where the year is 2021. Okay. So that's my x-axis, and it's going to get all of the statuses. And because I tested this, I know that it's going to sort it correctly by alphabetical, and I'm okay with that for right now. Okay, so we got that, and I can see on my chart, hopefully you can all see it too, is now we have all of the distinct statuses. Then I can go over to, for the x-axis, I can do something similar and do another execute SQL statement that instead does a count of the statuses where the year is the same year. And I'm going to add a SQL clause group by status. And then I'm going to just make sure that it's going to order by status in ascending order. So if you, hopefully you can see that. If not, I apologize. It's just, and I can't zoom in. Oh yeah, I can. Okay, there we go. Haha, look at that. I don't know if you can see it though. That's the problem. All right, so that didn't work. Let's scroll back up. All right, so when we do that, we, in just a matter of a couple seconds, we get the data done beautiful, it's ready to go. That's one chart, and it will, it's perform those calculations. And as long as I don't make any changes, it's going to stay static and the chart will be just fine. If I wanted to change years, then we might get some slowness with that. All right. So that is very simply working with one way to work with data to collect data in FileMaker. We'll get to some more in a little bit. Do you recommend any of these libraries? Yes, I recommend all of those. So there you go. That's my answer. I like Apex charts. It's got a lot of possibilities, but I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. What a lot of people have brought up is a concept of a data warehouse. And I did ask this question at the beginning, asking, what is our concept of that? And so I have a data warehouse that in this that I'd like to just show. Well, first of all, before we do that, gotta go back there. There we go. All right. So data warehouse, what is your understanding of a data warehouse? And at the time when I collected the data, here is what people were saying. Basic, a repository of data, cache of normalized data. There's some interesting words here, normalized, and then analytics and statistics. What else do we got? Separate tables file for pre-summarized data. This is an interesting idea, and I want to just think about that for a second, see what you all think. This is interesting from Wikipedia. Someone brought in the Wikipedia definition. That's great. Data can be aggregated but stored in the raw for fastest performance. That's interesting. Okay, very good. Someone doesn't have an understanding of it. There we go. So this was the understanding at the moment this morning when I gathered the final data. And I think generally, that's what we all think of. I don't think any of this is incorrect, because as people here would say, the rule one, the first rule of data warehouses is there are no rules about how the data is stored. So this doesn't really answer any questions, because there's just nothing to fall back on and kind of understand. So I'm interested in what you would have to say, and then we'll take a look at my example. How would you set up a data warehouse? And I don't mean for you to describe every single thing, but I'm just curious, like, how would your data be? What kind of data would you store in there? How would you summarize the data? How would you start to approach this if you if you decided to create a data warehouse? I collect summary data for special overnight for speeding reporting, option to regather live. All right, so we got some good responses. Keep on typing them in there. I'm going to show you my example of a warehouse for this project that I was working on, for this example that I was working on. because I want to get data, real data into this Apex chart and eventually a dashboard with multiple kinds of data. I chose a data warehouse that looks like this, where I have one record per sort of storage of data. It's only a few fields. Basically, these are the three that really count, that really matter. The rest are just stuff. And what I chose to do was I chose to think of a way to store the data. I wanted to do a count status, and I wanted a specific array per year. So I can eventually I can pull all of these separately into separate charts, or and so forth. So that's how I did it. I used, in this case, I used a script, very verbose, long, crazy script. I've actually got quite a few of them here now, but the first one was status counts. I actually kind of tried to make this as modular as possible, where again, if you can't read it, sorry, where the parent script, it has all of the years that I want to collect data from, and then it passes it finds the records in a particular year, and then it passes it to a subscript that actually then goes through, it actually loops through all of the records and counts up each status individually. In this case, I'm using, here are all my statuses, and I'm actually going to be using, in this case, I'm using named buckets. If you're familiar with that term, it's really just one variable with different repetitions at the bottom, where normally there's a 1 there, but I'm actually using the code of the status name to record the count. So I'm gonna let this run here and just get it, at least get it to there, and let it run here. So this is what, if you can see this, this is what I have for my storage device during the script. The status and this repetition, this code is one of the statuses turned into a number using FileMaker's code function. And then, so once I've got that, I can go to each individual record and I can simply add it to whichever variable repetition matches the status. So 19, this one right here might be new. And so every time it gets to a new record, it's going to increment this by 1. So I chose to do it this way simply for the fun of working with these named buckets. When I finish this, it's got to run through 4,000 records, but it shouldn't take too long. It shouldn't be too bad. I should have, you can see this here, if you can see this account of all of the information per status. So it's going through the records and it's adding them up and getting the totals. When I'm finished with that, I convert these back to their status words using the char function. And then what I'm doing is putting them into that JSON object. So that script ran this one right here. And it actually did all of these because I wanted them to be in different records. So I've got this data here. Now I can use it. Now I can use it for populating in any chart. I could put this in a FileMaker chart and extract out the keys as necessary, but I'm going to head towards the FileMaker chart. So this is my warehouse. I realized that I wanted them all separate, but then at some point I really wanted, let's see, I wanted status, it's statuses by year. So here is a new one that I wrote, a new warehouse summary function that just said for the year 2021, what was all of the status count and so forth for each of the years. So that's the one I'll probably end up using, but it is, this is how I did it. So I'm on this route where I'm using JSON to store because it leaves me the least number of fields. It leaves me with something that I'm used to working with that I know I can get JavaScript to work with. All right. So we're going to keep on moving. Let's go back to the slides. There was a good one that came up. This is not an easy question to answer. It depends on what types of data you are working with. Media assets are sometimes dependent on the hardware. Okay. So most of us are, at least for this, for charting for a library, are working with, this time or gathering the data and summarizing it in some way. All right. Let's keep going. So I said that I want to focus on JavaScript charts. JavaScript charts need data too. They need data. In this case, Apex charts needs the data formatted like this. Okay. So I am going to, in the last few minutes here, I'm going to attempt to show how I'm able to get the data in here as it needs to be. So where do I start? I start by, let me think here. What am I going to do? So the whole purpose of this is to get this in here and get this in here. And I'm going to go ahead and, actually, I think, let me look. Yeah, I do have it. So where'd it go? That's right. I'm trying to find, okay, yep. All right. So here is my JavaScript, or here's my FileMaker chart. And what I'm going to do, I've got this function here that actually does exactly what I use for the execute SQL. And I'm going to show what it looks like. I think this is right. So here is, it looks like I got to fix something, but this is actually this JSON object here. I've constructed it in the way that JavaScript needs it. So that's good. I'm not sure why my categories are broken. I have to take a look at that. Let's see, dimension, select status. Maybe did I do something wrong? Let's try that again. Categories, the dimension is right here. Yep. Okay. So these are all of my statuses. And I need to construct them. Yep. And then I need to put them into an array. Okay. So I got something wrong with my GORIES. Shoot. What happened here? Well, this worked before. What did I do wrong? Oh, no, that's right.
You still have colors in your series. Is that messing you up?
I'm not actually even in there yet, but I will get there in a moment. I'm still figuring out why did this dimensions, categories. Okay, so it's right here that I've broken something. All right, so because this is live coding, I don't know, maybe I spelled the variable wrong. So I'm just going to copy this and see if this fixes it. I don't know. Boom. I may have to just fake it at the moment. Categories, okay. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Don't tell anybody, but I am going to stick that in there and just let this be what I need it to be. All right, so, I know why. Should have thought of this before. I'm not, what am I not doing? I'm not quoting every single one of them. So let me do that here. Boom, 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 boom. This is, I'm putting the escape quotes. I think this is the right. Yep. All right, there we go. Okay, so I got it to work. Yay. All right, so here is my object that here's what I'm going to send to JavaScript. I'm going to send this categories, and eventually I'm going to replace what's here with the categories from FileMaker, and the data that's over here. The data that's over here, I'm going to replace with, I'm going to replace in the JavaScript. So we got that set finally. Now, in order to get that in there, we need to do a quick thing in our JavaScript where we ask FileMaker to load the chart. So I'm going to say window.load apex charts, and I'm going to write a quick function here that looks like this, and in it is the function. So when I run this function, let's go back to my warehouse or to my dashboard. This is going to actually run, when I run this load apex chart, this script, I'm going to give it a function name in a new variable. I'm going to call it load if the case has to be the same, load apex charts. And so what this will do is it will tell the web viewer, hey, I want you to find this load apex charts and I want you to run it. So hopefully that will work. Okay, nothing has changed. In our JavaScript now, we are going to pass in an object, and we're going to pass in the data. So that's where it's coming from. So let's go over here, back here, and tell the script, I want you to go and perform that script. Not perform out, PS, perform script. And we're going to find the script that I just worked on. Yep, that was it, right? Data start. Yep. So I'm going to ask it to run and run that script, and then get the results. I'm going to call this data, and I'm going to do get script results. Okay. So this is it's pretty simple in its construction. I've got a web viewer named web, and I'm getting some code. I'm actually getting code from the server from VS Code at the moment. And I've got a function name. I've got some data, and I'm going to pass that into the JavaScript right here. So if we do this over in the JavaScript and we say console log object, hopefully we'll get that exact data that we need, that we asked it to from FileMaker. So let's run that. Apex charts. Okay, so nothing happened that we saw because the data is still hard coded. But if I go into the inspector and I inspect it, oh, you know what? Sorry, I got to do something here. Let's bring up my terminal. And let's quit that and let's rebuild it. All right, so hopefully this will work. Okay. Come on. 1 second. Just gonna refresh it. So hopefully it's going to find this function now. npm start. Let that build. And let's see if this will run correctly. Oh, come on, I know what the problem is. Trying to do too much here, and it's let's just delete that. All right. There we go. Load Apex charts. Here, we're going to try something. We're going to move over to this. First checkout. All right. And that's not the right one. Okay, well, this is failing at the moment. Load Apex charts. Why did that fail? Let's go back to that. Let's try it one more time. And then we will window.load Apex charts. And that's a function. And we're going to ask it to render that. Okay. load Apex charts. I'm going to copy this and put it over here in case I misspelled something. Boom. All right, please work now. Oh, I bet I know why. Silly me. I was not in dev mode. Dev mode needs to be running for it to pull from this chart over here. And that is true. Now it's running here. Okay, so now should be good. There we go. Okay. Now it's working. We now have inside of the JavaScript, we'll have the data and we can work with it. Actually, I didn't load it in. So now I'm going to load it in and console.log object. All right. So we reload it. And finally, we get, hopefully, yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we have the data finally from FileMaker. We can put it into FileMaker. I'm going to skip over a couple things simply in the interest of time. But one thing I have to do is I have to parse this object. So I'm going to say JSON.parse and object. And now that data, if I console log the data, console.log data, now it's ready to be used by JavaScript right here. So now we've got a nice looking array to use, a couple arrays. This right here is just a string. JavaScript won't know what to do with that. So now that I have this object, I can use my JavaScript skills, and this is very attuned to what we do in FileMaker. Is I could say const categories equals data.categories and const series equals data dot what did I call it? I forget what I called it. What did I call it? I called it start. Category. Okay, categories. Okay, no, that's categories, and it is data. So we're going to just do data dot data. All right. All right, and then if we're lucky, I'm going to replace this hard-coded values with that variable, the categories, and I'm going to replace the hard-coded series data with that variable. So the idea is that it comes in from FileMaker here. It gets turned into a correct object for JavaScript, and then we can extract out of it using paths, using the dot notation. We can extract out the two keys that we store the arrays in, and then we can apply those keys to the options of the chart. So let's see if that works. There we go. There we go. Woo, yay. So I'm able now to work with the data in JavaScript. In JavaScript from FileMaker. Okay, so I'm getting a minute check here, so I'm going to just skip a bunch of stuff and just get to the point where we can work with dashboards in JavaScript. I have a dashboard here all ready to go. Hopefully this will work. And if I'm lucky, so here now I'm getting 3 pieces of data, or I'm going to get 3 different charts, and I actually have, yep, I have that. So I'm going to ask going to ask my function that loads the chart to go and seek out 3 pieces of data. And of course, that's not working. All right, so we're going to stop there. Oh, I see. Nope, I got it right here. There we go. Charts. Load Apex charts. Okay. Please work. There we go. All right, so at least we're getting 2 pieces of data in. The third is on its way. Now I can start to collect different pieces of data from FileMaker, and I did that in this here, where I'm just using execute SQL 3 times, and I'm creating 3 different elements of data. In this case, I'm pulling from my data warehouse. I'm pulling those arrays from my warehouse 3 different ways. And then I'm sending all of that to FileMaker or to JavaScript. And then each of the charts is starting to work with the data and process them. So we're a little bit over. I want to stop here, but this is working with data in JavaScript. I made some mistakes. I got them fixed, moved on. This is typical of working in JavaScript. It is a little bit annoying and frustrating. I don't hope that doesn't push you off on it, because it's actually, once you get it, it really works really well and it's nice to work with. So I am going to stop right there. If you have any further questions, I would love you to throw them in the question and answer period. I'm doing a lot more content creation around this so that we can spend time in each one of these. And if you're interested in some sort of course, some sort of webinar, some sort of meeting that we can gather together and actually go in depth about this rather than just speed through it, ping me, let me know. It's jeremy.brown@proofgeist.com and or see me in the community. So that's it. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for letting me be here.
Jeremy, thank you very much. It was very great. Another deep dive today. Today was a day for people who type well, for both some content areas, but I thought that was really intriguing, really in depth, and a good look at a path forward on both things, on both the JSON and on the JavaScript. I think both our presenters did a great job of helping us find a doorway in if we didn't have one already on doing this kind of work. So really great. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. Well, that's our August meeting. Ready to wrap everything up. Feel free to hang out and talk for a little while. I'll leave things open for everybody. And I'm going to stop the recording now and have fun.